The photograph arrived at my conservation studio in a shoebox, wrapped in tissue paper that had yellowed to the color of old bone. The note attached was written in shaky handwriting. My mother said to never show this to anyone, but she's been dead 10 years now, and I need to know the truth. Can you tell me what I'm really looking at? It was signed Eleanor Whitfield, with a return address in rural Vermont. I unwrapped the photograph carefully. It was mounted on thick cardboard backing, typical of studio work from the 1890s, though this clearly hadn't been taken in a studio. The image showed a family of 8 posed in front of a weathered, clapboard house. A father in a dark suit, 2 adult women in severe dark dresses, and 5 children arranged in a line. The house behind them was simple, probably a farmhouse, with a window visible over the shoulder of the woman standing in the doorway. The photograph was in remarkably good condition for its age. The exposure well balanced, the focus sharp. But something about it immediately unsettled me, though I couldn't identify what. There was a tension in the family's postures, a rigidity that went beyond the typical formality of 19th century photography. I set up my scanner and began the digitization process. As the high-resolution image loaded on my screen, I zoomed in to examine different sections, looking for damage that needed repair. That's when I saw her. In the window behind the family, barely visible through the glass, was a face. A woman's face, pale and indistinct, with dark eyes and disheveled hair. She appeared to be looking directly at the camera, her expression somewhere between anguish and rage. I sat back from my computer, my heart pounding. At first glance, I'd thought the window was empty. The face was so faint, so easily missed, that I'd nearly overlooked it entirely. But once I'd seen it, I couldn't unsee it. I enhanced that section of the image, adjusting brightness and contrast. The face became clearer. Definitely a woman. Definitely probably middle-aged with a gaunt face and wild hair. She stood close to the window, her hands pressed against the glass, her mouth open as though she was shouting or screaming. But the family in front of the house showed no awareness of her presence. They stood still and solemn, staring at the camera. Not one of them glanced at the window where the woman's face appeared. I examined the rest of the photograph more carefully. The family consisted of a man in his 40s, 2 women who appeared to be in their 30s, and 5 children, ranging in age from perhaps 4 to 15. Everyone looked directly at the camera, except for one of the boys, maybe 10 or 11 years old, whose eyes were angled slightly upward, toward the window, as though he could see her. I called Eleanor Whitfield. When she answered, I could hear the tremor in her voice, even before I spoke. "You found something, didn't you?" "There's a face in the window," I said. "Behind your family. Do you know who it might be?" The silence stretched so long I thought the call had dropped. Finally, "My mother said there was someone else in the photograph. Someone who shouldn't be there. She said that's why the family buried the photograph. Why they never spoke of it. But she never told me who it was." "Do you have any other information about when this was taken, or who these people are?" "The man is my great-great-grandfather, Thomas Whitfield." The woman in the doorway is his wife, Clara. The other woman is Clara's sister, Abigail. The children are their children. The photograph was taken in September 1892 at the family farm in Vermont. And 3 weeks later, the house burned down. Everyone in the photograph died, except for 2 of the children. My mouth went dry. Everyone died. Thomas, Clara, Abigail, and 3 of the children. The house caught fire in the middle of the night. Only the 2 oldest boys made it out. One of them was my great-grandfather, Samuel. He was 15 when it happened. He's the one on the far right in the photograph. I looked at the boy she'd indicated, tall for his age, with a serious expression and those eyes that looked toward the window. The boy who had survived. "Did Samuel ever talk about the fire?" I asked. "Never. My mother said he refused to speak about it his entire life. But she said he had nightmares until the day he died. He'd wake up screaming about a woman with wild hair, about someone trying to get into the house." I felt cold. The woman in the window has wild hair. Eleanor's breath caught. "Then it's real. It's not just damage to the photograph, or a shadow or something. There really is someone there." "There's definitely a face. Whether it's someone who was actually present when the photograph was taken or..." I trailed off, not sure how to finish that sentence. "Or a ghost," Eleanor finished for me. "That's what my mother always said. That the photograph captured something that shouldn't be visible. Something that was coming for the family." Over the next few days, I researched the Whitfield family fire. It had been big news in rural Vermont in October 1892. The newspaper accounts were consistent. The house had caught fire around 2 in the morning. By the time neighbors arrived, the structure was fully engulfed. Thomas Whitfield, his wife Clara, her sister Abigail, and 3 of their children, Mary, 13, John, 8, and little Emma, 4, had all perished in the flames. The 2 oldest boys, Samuel, 15, and James, 11, had managed to escape through a second-floor window. The fire's cause was listed as undetermined, possibly lamp or stove. But I found something else in the newspaper coverage. A brief mention in an article dated a week after the fire. Young Samuel Whitfield, who survived the tragic fire that claimed his parents and siblings, has been reticent to speak with authorities about the events of that terrible night. When pressed by the fire marshal, the boy became agitated and insisted that she wouldn't let them out. He claimed the doors were stuck, that his mother and father couldn't open them from the inside. Doctors attribute these statements to the trauma of the experience and the inhalation of smoke. She wouldn't let them out. I looked at the face in the window again. The woman with the wild hair and anguished expression, her hands pressed against the glass. Who was she? And why did Samuel claim she wouldn't let the family out of the burning house? I expanded my research to include the family's history before the fire. Thomas Whitfield had been a farmer, moderately successful, respected in the community. He'd married Clara Morrison in 1875. They'd had 5 children. Clara's sister Abigail had lived with them since 1890, after her husband died and left her destitute. Then I found something in the vital records that made me pause. Abigail Morrison's husband hadn't just died. He'd drowned in the Connecticut River in March 1890. The coroner's report noted that his death was suspicious, but ultimately ruled it accidental. Abigail had inherited his property and had sold it quickly, moving in with her sister's family. I kept digging. In a county history book, published in 1895, I found a section about prominent families that included the Whitfields. It mentioned the fire and listed the dead, but it also included something I hadn't seen in any other source. The Whitfield tragedy was made more poignant by rumors that preceded it. Some neighbors reported seeing a woman on the property in the weeks before the fire. A vagrant or madwoman who would stand outside the house at night, staring at the windows. Thomas Whitfield reported the sightings to the sheriff, but no vagrant was ever apprehended. Some superstitious locals claimed the woman was a harbinger of doom, a banshee come to mark the family for death. A woman standing outside the house at night, staring at the windows, just like the woman in the photograph. I found one more piece of the puzzle in a letter preserved in the Vermont Historical Society's archives. It was written by a neighbor, Mrs. Helen Carter, to her daughter in Boston, dated October 5, 1892, just days after the fire. The Whitfield fire was terrible, and the whole community is in mourning. But I must tell you something I have told no one else. The morning before the fire, I happened to pass by the Whitfield farm. It was early, just after dawn, and I saw someone standing at the window of the house, the front window facing the road. It was a woman with wild, unkempt hair. She was inside the house, looking out at me with such a terrible expression. I thought perhaps it was Abigail, Clara's sister, who has not been well lately. But when I mentioned it to Clara at church the next day, she looked at me strangely and said Abigail had not been near the front of the house that morning, that she had been ill in bed. Clara seemed troubled by what I told her. That was the last time I saw her alive. I've not mentioned this to the authorities because I fear they will think me mad. But I am certain of what I saw. There was someone in that house. Someone who should not have been there. Someone who should not have been there. I looked at the photograph again with new understanding. The family had posed for this portrait in September 1892. In the window behind them appeared a woman who, according to local reports, had been seen lurking around the property. A woman no one could identify or catch. 3 weeks after the photograph was taken, the house burned down, and everyone inside, except the 2 oldest boys, died in the fire. Samuel, the survivor, claimed she wouldn't let them out. But who was she? A vagrant? A mad woman? Or something else? I examined the faces in the photograph more carefully. Thomas Whitfield looked stern and tired. His wife Clara stood rigid in the doorway, her expression unreadable. But Abigail, Clara's sister, looked different from everyone else. Her face was pale, her eyes hollowed, and she stood slightly apart from the family, as though she didn't quite belong with them. And when I enhanced her section of the image, I noticed something I'd missed before: Abigail's shadow. Everyone in the photograph cast a shadow, consistent with the morning sun, coming from the left side of the frame. But Abigail's shadow was wrong. It fell at a different angle, as though she'd been lit by a different light source. I'd seen this before, in other photographs I'd studied. This kind of shadow anomaly sometimes indicated that the person had been added to the photograph later, through double exposure or composite printing. But when I examined the emulsion and the paper backing, everything pointed to this being a single exposure, not a manipulated image, which left another possibility. An impossible possibility. Abigail Morrison's shadow fell wrong because she wasn't entirely present when the photograph was taken. She was there physically, standing with the family, but something about her was already gone, already disconnected from the living world. I called Eleanor again and told her what I'd found. I think Abigail might be the key to understanding this photograph. Do you know anything else about her? Only what my mother told me, Eleanor said. She said Abigail had gone mad in the months before the fire. She'd become obsessed with the idea that someone was trying to get into the house at night, that there was a woman outside who wanted to hurt the family. Clara thought it was just grief. Abigail's husband had died 2 years earlier. But Abigail became more and more unstable. She'd pace the house at night, checking windows and doors. She'd stand at the windows for hours, staring out into the darkness. Standing at the windows, staring out. Just like the woman in the photograph. Eleanor, I said slowly, what if the woman in the window isn't someone outside the house? What if it's Abigail herself? But Abigail is in the photograph. She's standing with the family. Yes, and she's also in the window. Because by the time this photograph was taken, Abigail wasn't entirely sane. Part of her was standing with the family, going through the motions of normal life. But another part of her, the mad part, the part consumed by grief and rage, was already trapped, already trying to get out, already screaming at the world. I enhanced the face in the window one more time, bringing out as much detail as possible. The wild hair, the gaunt face, the anguished expression. And when I compared it side by side with Abigail's face as she stood with the family, I could see the similarity. The same bone structure, the same deep-set eyes. It was Abigail in the window, the mad, fractured version of herself, visible to the camera, if not to the family standing in front of the house. My mother said Abigail started the fire, Eleanor said quietly. She never told me that directly, but I overheard her talking to my aunt once. She said the family knew, but could never prove it. That Samuel told his brother James, and James told his children years later. Abigail had locked the doors from the inside and set the house on fire while everyone was sleeping. She died in the flames with the rest of them, but she'd made sure they couldn't escape. Why would she do that? My mother didn't know. Maybe grief drove her mad.
Maybe she wanted revenge for something we don't know about. Or maybe she just wanted to make sure her sister shared her pain. That Clara would know what it felt like to lose everything. I looked at the photograph one last time. The family arranged in front of their house, 3 weeks before they would die. Thomas, stern and unaware. Clara, rigid and uncomfortable. The children, solemn and still. And Abigail, standing apart, her shadow falling wrong, while her fractured, maddened self pressed against the window glass behind them.
Screaming silently at the camera. A warning no one understood until it was too late. The photograph captured the truth, I told Eleanor. It showed Abigail as she really was, divided, broken, already planning to destroy them all. Her physical body stood with the family, but her spirit, her true self, was already trapped inside the house, already screaming, already on fire. The restored photograph now sits in Eleanor's home in Vermont, properly framed and preserved. She's donated high-resolution copies to the State Historical Society, along with all the documentation I compiled. The historians are fascinated by the shadow anomaly and the face in the window, though they're careful to offer only technical explanations about photographic quirks and development errors. But Eleanor knows the truth. And so do I. The photograph doesn't lie. It shows exactly what was there in September 1892. A family marked for death, standing in front of their house, while the mad woman who would kill them all pressed her face against the window behind them, screaming her warning that no one could hear. Samuel had seen her, his eyes in the photograph angled toward the window, toward the terrible truth he couldn't yet understand. 3 weeks later, he would wake to fire and smoke and locked doors, to his mother's screams and his aunt's laughter. He would escape through a second-floor window, dragging his younger brother with him. And he would watch the house burn with his family inside. And he would spend the rest of his life haunted by nightmares of a woman with wild hair. A woman who wouldn't let them out. A woman who had been there all along, visible in the photograph, warning them of what was coming. The face in the window. Abigail Morrison, fractured, mad, screaming, already burning, already dead, already dragging her family into the flames with her. The photograph captured it all. The calm facade and the hidden horror, the peaceful family portrait, and the madness behind it, the moment before everything burned. All of it there, if you knew where to look. If you saw the wrong shadow, the face in the window, the boy whose eyes saw what no one else could see. The photograph doesn't lie. It shows the truth. Even when the truth is unbearable. Even when the truth is fire and madness. And a woman divided against herself, standing with her family, while simultaneously trying to warn them, or perhaps to claim them, from behind the glass. The house is long gone, burned to its foundation in 1892. But the photograph remains, and in the window, Abigail still screams, still warns, still waits, forever trapped in that moment before the fire, forever divided, forever mad, forever staring from the window behind them, the ghost of what was coming, the harbinger of the flames.